Hi, I'm Doug Sliding, the president of Ascent Practice Growth Strategies. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about patient acquisition costs and essentially how to attract patients at the lowest acquisition cost possible. And really, one of the things we'll look at is how you can predict that prior to starting any type of campaign. So I want to start by doing a screen share. We're going to go through a few slides together today. And push play. So what we're going to cover today are, first, I want to talk about what good return on investment looks like, what patient acquisition costs should be. I found in my many years of working with dentists in marketing that that's kind of a little bit of a mystery is what is a good per patient acquisition cost. Number two, we're going to cover Google Ads and how they work. It's also known as pay-per-click. So we'll look at how that works. Then we're going to look at what's called a data path and how that can predict results going into the process. And as part of this, we're going to do an interactive demonstration. So if you could have your smartphone ready in just a few minutes, I'm going to have you look at your own practice, and we'll be able to look at your own data path and predict your own results to decide if it's smart for your practice to run a Google ad campaign. All right, so let's start with new patient acquisition costs and talk about what is considered good. So kind of like all questions in business, that really depends on a few things. The first one is, what is your annual per patient value? You know, we've worked with practices, many practices over the years, and some practices we've seen have, $1,600 per patient annual value. Others we've seen with $250 annual per patient value. And depending on what your patients are worth, obviously that's going to change the amount that it makes sense to spend on bringing in a new patient. If your per patient values are really low, you can't spend very much because you've got overhead costs and other things you have to cover. But I'll kind of talk about that. And that leads to the second thing it really depends on, and that's your overhead rate. Some practices run really lean and have a 60% overhead rate. Some practices don't run lean at all. I've seen 80% overhead rates. And again, the better your overhead rate, the more you can invest in per patient acquisition costs. So one of your goals as a practice should be to consistently be striving to increase your per patient value and decrease your overhead. If you have great per patient value and low overhead, you can spend a little more to bring patients in, and it's still going to be a very profitable process for you. Whereas, again, if the opposite's true, then you're always going to struggle just to make ends meet. So those should be your goals. Now, what we're going to do, though, is we're going to kind of assume some averages here. We're going to look at about $1,000 per patient value, just so that we can nail this down a little bit. But $1,000 annual per patient value, and then about a 70% overhead. Those are pretty typical numbers. Most practices are going to be around those numbers, so that gives us somewhere to start. Now, ideally, in this scenario, you'd want your per patient acquisition cost to be $300 or less. Because if you're doing this, then even in year one with those patients, you're not going to be losing any money. You'll be at a minimum breaking even with that. Again, if it's less than 300 and you're at 70% overhead and $1,000 per patient value, you're actually going to make a little money in year one on those patients. Most patients are going to have, at least a 5-year value, and some a lot longer. So over time, you'll end up making a lot of money off those. In fact, with a $1,000 per patient value and 70% overhead, we really feel like it's actually acceptable to be under $500 in per patient acquisition costs. The reason for this is because, most patients don't just stay for 1 year. Most patients are going to come back year over year. And so if we just look at a 5-year value for those patients, they're really worth about $5,000 to the practice. And over that time, you'll spend about $3,500 in overhead costs for that patient on average. And so that really leaves you with still a $1,000 return on investment, even if we minus out the $500 per patient acquisition cost. And so, if you're doing that consistently with a lot of patients, you're still building a lot of return on investment and profit into that. So a lot of that is just your tolerance for where your budgets are and so forth. But again, if you're running a pretty good overhead, you can go a little bit above that threshold to bring patients in. So hopefully that's helpful. Because what we're really looking for in most cases, though, is 300, 500 is acceptable, and we go from there. Now, when we're going to look at these campaigns now, we're going to look at growth campaigns. And we've found that for most of our clients, especially when we recommend and we've got the right circumstances that you're in your area, we can bring in patients for much lower than $300 per patient. In fact, our average for our clients is about $197 for all of our clients. And so it really puts practices in a good position to grow without losing money, especially in that first year. So let's talk a little bit about these pay-per-click ads and how they work. And again, they're called Google ads is the technical name, but a lot of people call them pay-per-click. I apologize if I kind of switch between the two. But if I say Google ads or pay-per-click, I'm talking about the same thing. So the first thing you do is you're going to set a budget with Google. Okay, and you can make that budget anything you want. I'll show you later in the interactive demonstration how you're going to set the budget based on your goal. Okay, but that budget can theoretically be anything. And then you're going to place an ad with Google, which I'll talk more about in a minute. That ad, every time someone clicks on it, it debits an amount from your account. Okay, so you put the budget in there, someone clicks on your ad, a little bit of money is pulled out of that budget, and the cost, so each time they click, it's going to be different for everybody. You know, I have a practice in Las Vegas, you have a practice in Kansas City, they each run an ad. It's not the same price. It's going to be vastly different. And even depending on where you're at in those cities, if you're downtown versus the suburbs versus out in a more rural area, pricing is different everywhere. And what sets the price is how competitive your area is. Basically, the more dentists you have vying for those few spots that Google puts available, the more they drive up the price because the demand is high. When demand goes up, price goes up. So the more competitive, the more expensive. And also, how often your ad appears depends on the size of your budget. Oftentimes, a mistake we see is your budgets are so small, the ad's not appearing enough to make it worthwhile. You got to have at least enough budget to get your ad to appear regularly at the right times of day too. You don't want to be appearing constantly at midnight. You want to be appearing, when you're open. So finally, the more searched keywords cost more as well. So it's the competition. Obviously, everybody wants the most searched keywords. So for example, the word dentist is probably the most searched keyword. Everybody wants to appear on that search when the word dentist pops up. And because of that, that's going to be more expensive than some more obscure keywords people aren't searching very much. Again, the payoff is just doesn't appear very much if it's not a popular keyword. So that's how it works. Hopefully that's helpful to understand just that process, why the costs go up and down, and they are constantly changing, by the way. All right. Next, let's talk about what the agency controls. So if you work with a company like ours, we actually have a lot to do with the success of the campaign. The practice has a big job at the end I'll talk about, but the agency really controls most of the success of the campaign. First of all, they control the Google ad itself. Now, the Google ad has to be approved by Google. In fact, when you first set it up, it goes through a period where Google freezes that, tests it, and then doesn't allow you to make changes at first because they want to make sure it's correct. In fact, they're very strict about how you can set it up. There's certain character counts, certain ways you have to set it up. And so the agency has to know what they're doing when they set that ad up in the first place. They have to understand what the strategy of the ad is, who it's going to appeal to, what keywords it's going to focus on, what time of day it's going to appear, and ultimately the area it's going to target. If the agency doesn't understand how to set those ads up properly, you're just not going to get very good click-through rate, which means people aren't going to click on the ad to go to your landing page, okay? Because that ad's going to appear. How often do they click through to the landing page? Most companies see about 2 to 3%, and I'll talk about what we get in just a bit. So that's really critical. Next is the landing page itself. The agency controls the landing page, and this what you're looking at here is a sample of landing page, and it really needs to be set up for several functions. The first is strategy, right? It has to sell not just the idea of implants in this case, but implants with Bird Dental. And so you have to be able to have information and content that makes people feel comfortable making the phone call, because ultimately that's the whole purpose of this, is it's got to produce phone calls, right? The higher rate of phone calls you produce when people hit your landing page, the more successful the campaign. And also you want to bring in patients that are going to be quality patients that will stay in the practice and add to the per patient value, not detract from it because they're one and done. And that's really set up by the content and the branding and so forth on that landing page. And you can see this when it's set up for implants, but if we scroll down, it really focuses on information that helps people not just feel comfortable about the idea of getting implants, but getting them from Dr. Bird, right? There's videos, there's information on the practice itself, on how implants work. You can meet the doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And so understanding how to build those, and these look like web pages, like a home page, but they're really separate landing pages. They can be part of the website or independent from it. And there's advantages to doing it in different ways. But for the most part, how you build that ad is going to determine the quality of the patient, the quality of the phone call, and how many phone calls. Okay, finally, the agency also controls the dynamic call tracking, or the call tracking in general. And a lot of agencies don't even use dynamic call tracking. They use more old-fashioned call tracking, or none at all, we've even seen. But ultimately, your ability to integrate the ad to the Google My Business account and landing page and have that call tracking number, be able to track all that data and information and how people are searching and moving through those things, is really important, because the better it's set up, the better data you get to predict. I've talked about that a few times. We want to predict the future, and you need that quality data. And also, you need to know the reality of what happened, how many patients actually came into the practice and converted to patients through the process. When you have quality data, this allows you to make adjustments on an ongoing basis, monthly, weekly, whatever's needed, to continually fine-tune this process to attract better and better patients. And one of the things we're really proud of is because we get such quality data in the way we pull information and reporting, our adjustments just get better and better, and our campaigns tend to improve and improve over time. So when we make predictions up front, we're generally pretty confident we can hit them, especially if we have a few months to make those adjustments. So just as a review, the agency controls the ad itself, the landing page, and the dynamic call tracking setup. And ultimately, all of that determines the quality of the lead and the patient. There's companies we've seen that can just push phone calls in, but they're not really good quality. They're ultimately going to, not convert or drive your per patient value down. That's not what we're all about, because ultimately the success of your campaign is really dependent primarily on the agency and their ability to do it right. And that's what we really focus on. So one of the things to note about that, I mentioned earlier that the practice actually does have a big responsibility at the end, and that's converting the phone calls, right? Your team should really know how to answer those phone calls, be aware of the ads that are running, be aware of any specials you're offering, why people would be calling, and be able to convert those really well. And if your team can't convert really well, training would be a really good idea, because the difference between a trained team and an untrained team is really huge. And it makes a big difference in the per patient acquisition costs. Okay, now we're going to now talk about what we call intelligent data paths. Data paths, and when you understand the data path from conception to conversion, you can reliably predict. I mean, it's based on averages, so it's going to be a little up and down every month, but on average, you can predict the outcome of marketing campaigns. The more data you get, the better the predictions get. And so I want to show you how these data paths work before we dive into your data path. So first of all, I mentioned earlier that you always start with your goal. How many patients do you want? So in this case, we'll just set it, let's say 5 patients is our new patient goal. We want to bring in an additional 5 patients a month. The first thing we have to estimate is what is going to be our call conversion percentage. And what we found over the years is most practices that are doing a pretty good job when it comes to Google ads are going to convert at about 20%. You might think that's a little low or a little high, I'm not sure where you're at, A lot of times it's 20% doesn't seem that good, but for a pay-per-click campaign or Google ad, 20% is actually a really good conversion rate. If you're running direct mail, it should be a lot higher than that, 40+%. If you're talking about referrals, patient referrals, it should be like 80, 90%. But in a Google ad situation, a 20% conversion would be a good goal. And most practices we work with are going to see about a 20% call conversion rate, right? So we can accurately say, okay, it's going to be about 20%. Well, to get 5 patients at 20% conversion, that means you need to have 25 phone calls. 25 opportunities will lead to 5 patients in that scenario, right? So we're just kind of working backwards with the math. Next, well, if to get 25 phone calls, what is your click to call percentage? Meaning how many people get to your landing page and what percentage of them make the phone call? Well, what we find is it's actually about 21%. Now, in reality, we're a lot higher than that, but we like to be a little conservative here, just to make sure that you feel comfortable that we're going to hit these numbers. But you should feel pretty confident that if you work with us, we're going to be able to get about 21% click to call. So 21% of the people we push to your ad, we're going to get on the phone to give you those opportunities, okay? Well, if that's true, if 21% are going to call, how many people do we need to click through to your ad? We need 119 clicks. Okay, again, backwards math. Now, if we need 119 clicks, the next thing we have to understand is your cost per click. And we've seen these numbers as low as $1, as high as $40. And they're kind of all over the place. And again, it depends on competition. If you're watching this, there's a good chance we contacted you because your area specifically has really low cost per click at the moment. And it gives you a really good opportunity. If we look at this kind of at about $5.25, let's say, per click. Well, if you need 119 clicks and it's going to cost $5.25 per click. When you multiply those two things, your Google monthly ad spend will need to be about $625. Okay. So at $625, you add in our fees. We charge a fixed $450 management fee because we put the same amount of time into your campaign, whether it's a small budget or large budget. Most companies increase that with the size of the budget. We just focus on doing it right no matter the size of your budget. We also do charge a $60 dynamic call tracking fee because that's what gives us the good data to continually improve your campaign and get better click-through rates, better click-to-call rates, and ultimately even better call conversion rates. When you add that up, you're looking at $1,135, right? So if you divide that by 5, I'm going to actually grab my calculator so I can make sure to get this right. But if you divide that by 5, it's about $227 a patient. So, it might seem like a lot to spend $1,100 for 5 patients, but really your per patient acquisition cost is well under $300. And for most practices, that is a good investment, even in year 1, and is most likely going to lead to, more profit and revenue down the road. And, you continue that and you keep that up every month. That's just building and building. So that's a really good data path. Okay. And in fact, there you go. Per patient acquisition cost, $227. Now, once I mentioned earlier, as you get more data, it gets more accurate and there's more and more improvement. So just to kind of show you how this works, as we pull data over time, you can see these campaigns started long time ago. We started the call tracking process, the dynamic call tracking in February. And you can see that once we did that, one of the things we learned over here on the right-hand side under call conversion is that they weren't converting at a very good rate. We did some call tracking training, improved that. And in the end, even at the bad rate, they're still bringing patients in for under $200. But in the end, the cost per patient for this particular practice has been on average $78 per patient, right? Their cost per click has been pretty low, and that's what helps that. And so depending on where yours sits out, that, it's going to determine the cost per patient. But as we pull all this data for this practice, and we understand they spend on average up here at the top, $480 on the right-hand side. The estimated revenue they're generating every month is $38.19. You pull out our costs, they should be making around $2,900 every month on return on investment, and their cost per patient, as I mentioned earlier, is $78. Now we know their numbers, we know their budget, we know the cost per click in their area, we know their click to call rates, their call conversion rates, and we can see patterns in those. And what's nice about that is we can now go in with this practice and set new patient goals. Like if they wanted to go from 5 new patients a month to 10 new patients a month, we know that the budget they need to set with Google is about $785 based on their numbers. And so now that predictive capability just gets better and better. And hopefully that gives you insight. It's not, there's no trick, it's just using analytics and math to predict the future. And as we play that out over time, we see that and adjust it when anomalies hit. So hopefully that's pretty exciting to you, that it's actually that predictable and can be planned that way. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run the assessment on your own practice. If you want to grab your phone and you're going to go to insight.ascentpgs.com, what we're going to do is just pull some information in your area, find out your cost per click, your estimated cost per click, look at your data path, just kind of that same thing I showed you earlier, so you can see what that's going to mean for you. So again, that's insight.ascentpgs.com. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen share to a web browser here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Now, if you go to insight.ascentpgs.com, you'll come here. And what's nice is we're not taking any personal information from you at this point, so don't worry about that. All we need to do is locate your Google My Business listing. So if you'll give us your zip code and then type in your practice name. It's not your personal name, just your practice name. Although a lot of times that does help, does work actually if you type in your personal name. But then the type of practice, you click on here if you're a specialist or a general dentist, and then click Find Your Listing. Okay, and what it's going to do is going to locate your official Google My Business listing, which it's done here, River City Dental. So I'm going to select that. Yep, that's correct. So hopefully you've got that in front of you. Now click Gather Data and Design Your Plan. And what it's going to do, it's going to just start pulling information from different public sources, mostly from Google, to try to find your Google Local, Google Reviews, your price per click, all this information, okay? And so today we're going to really focus just on one of these things, but just so you know, there's a wealth of information it just pulled, and it took all that information, analyzed it, and made some strategic recommendations. Again, we're not going to go into online today. You can watch one of our other videos for that. But that one shows you where you rank and how Google has you in local search and so forth compared to your competitors, your reviews and so forth. Your profitability is just looking at different options in specific profitability solutions that can help you increase your per patient value. But today we're going to focus on growth campaigns, okay? So you should have this page in front of you by now. Where would you like to begin? Well, you'd like to begin in growth, because that's what we're talking about today. So click Start with Growth. And what it's going to show you is your data path. Okay, now your cost per click should have just come up. The one I just searched is $6.60. National average right now is about $8.25. Our average in click-through rate is about 6%, which is double what most people see. I mean, it's just excellent. Again, we're going to look at a 21% click to call and a 21% click-through rate, and then 20% call conversion rate. So with that, let's go ahead and you get the option here of using our current averages as your estimating tool, or you can estimate more conservatively if you prefer. I'm just going to use our current averages, and this brings up your data path. So what you're looking at here as you click on that is your data path. You can see the new patient goal, and with this slider, you can actually move that to whatever goal you want. You want 10 patients, just move it to 10. You want 3 patients or 2 patients, you can put it there, and it's just going to show you what those costs are. So in this case, let's put it at 8 patients. 20% call conversion, we need 40 calls, 21% click to call, we need 190 clicks. at $6.60 per click. This budget needs to be about $1,258. Again, add in our fixed monthly fees, and you're at $17.68 a month. It's easy to get the calculator, divide that by 8, and figure out what that per patient value is for your practice. One of the great things too is again, we know you're going to get about 8 patients with this. Assuming each patient's worth about $1,000, you're looking at about $8,000 in annual revenue that you're generating per month, and about a $6,200 return on investment. If you want to, you can actually click on this little question mark here, and let's say you know how many patients you're seeing a month, or sorry, per year. Let's say you get about 1,200 patients a year. Your gross revenue was 900,000. Whoops, 900,000. Then your per patient value is going to be $750. If you enter that, it will now put your numbers in. So now our ROI is a little less, our revenue is a little less because our per patient value is less. So if you happen to know yours, you can put that in there. From there, and you can also look at postcards, direct mail, and if you click right here, you can see the data path for that and how that works. In this case, it's not nearly as good as a pay-per-click, so it's probably a smarter campaign to start as with the Google ads as opposed to a postcard. Additionally, if you'd like to, at this point, you have a few options, okay? If you'd like to talk to a marketing specialist about this, just click on this little phone at the top and it'll schedule a consultation with one of our marketing specialists. They can get on, talk you through this, answer any questions you have. Same time, if you feel pretty good about this campaign, which you should, especially if you've got a good per patient acquisition cost, you can simply add this to the cart. Then you can head into your cart and you can purchase this right here. I want to point out that we set these up as subscriptions, meaning you can cancel anytime. You know, if you give us 30 days notice, because we bill the month in advance, we give that money to Google, and we need time to cancel that campaign with Google, but basically you can cancel anytime you want and just give us 30 days notice. Okay, so there's those subscriptions. So it's a really low risk campaign. And, you know, we're predicting you're going to get about, this practice would get about 8 patients. Let's see what happens. Give us 2 to 3 months to run these campaigns and see if we can hit those new patient goals. In fact, if you're a little nervous about it, set your patient goal low, so your budgets are a little lower. Add that. So let's add that much to the cart. And now it's a lower subscription price. And you know, we're looking for 4 patients. And if we hit that, then it's okay to add in that extra budget, pay Google a little more, and we'll, you know, bring in more patients for that. So again, if that looks good, you can just check out here with your credit card. You can also schedule a call right here about this plan. And this particular campaign would be sent to our marketing specialist, so they would know exactly what you're looking at. You can also save this for later. Just click on this link, enter your first and last name, email address, and hit send link, and it will send you a link right back to this page that I'm looking at right now. So hopefully that was helpful for you in understanding per patient acquisition costs and what's good and what isn't good. And then hopefully now you can look at your practice and understand if these campaigns make sense for you. Again, our numbers are really good. We're good at what we do. We're confident what we do. And it's why we don't do long-term contracts and just do these subscriptions, because we know we can show you results pretty quickly and the risk is really minimal on your end to start these campaigns. So thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this and hopefully it was informative, and we'll talk to you again soon.